I didn't know his name when I first saw him, only that the room changed before he spoke. Men who looked untouchable stopped moving like they were waiting for permission to exist. The orchestra faltered, not because of music, but because attention had shifted to one man walking in like silence belonged to him. I was supposed to be invisible that night. Medical station tucked behind flowers and champagne glasses. Bandages, not conversations. Then he looked at me, not like the others, not like I was background. Like I was the only thing in the room not already owned. I offered him water before I knew who he was. No hesitation, no awareness of consequence, just instinct. "You look tired," I said, like it meant something normal. The man everyone avoided blinked once, then took the bottle from my hand. "Most people don't speak to me first," he said. "Most people look like they need rest," I replied. A pause, then the smallest shift in his expression, like something in him had been interrupted. "Dante Morty," someone whispered behind me. The room tightened. Too late. I was already looking at him like a patient, not a danger. And that was the moment he stopped being just a man in a suit and started being something that would not leave me alone. I told myself the gala didn't matter, that I would go back to hospital shifts, late trains, normal noise. But normal doesn't survive being looked at the way Dante Morty looked at me. The next morning, I was back in scrubs, tying my hair too tight, pretending my hands weren't slower than usual. "Elena," Giulia said, sliding beside me at the nurse's station. "You're quiet." "I'm always quiet." "No," she said gently, "this is different quiet." I almost told her. About the man who didn't ask questions when I spoke. About the way silence followed him like a second body. About the fact I still felt his attention like pressure on my skin. Instead, I lied. "Just tired." The emergency doors opened. Not loud, not chaotic, controlled. That was the first wrong sign. A patient came in gunshot wound. Guards followed. Too many, too still. And then I saw him again. Dante, not injured, not rushed, just present, as if the hospital had been waiting for him specifically. Nico appeared beside him, muttering, "If this is my fault, I'd like to blame pigeons in advance." Dante didn't look at him, he looked at me. "You work here," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," a pause, then quieter. "That makes things complicated." I frowned. "For who?" He didn't answer, but I noticed something. He already knew my schedule, already knew my name without asking. And still, he was pretending this was coincidence. Outside, a black car idled too long, watching, waiting. Like my normal life had already been rewritten, and I just hadn't read the new version yet. The first time I realized I was being followed, I convinced myself it was paranoia. The second time, I started checking reflections in glass doors. The third time, I stopped calling it coincidence. It was the same black car outside the hospital again, same distance, same stillness. Like it didn't need to move to be present. "Don't look at it like that," Nico said beside me, holding a coffee he clearly didn't trust. "It encourages it." "It's a car," I said. "It's a message," he corrected. "Cars like that don't park, they observe." I turned slightly anyway. The car didn't react. That was worse. Inside, Dante was already there, not in a dramatic entrance. Just inside the building like he had always had access. He didn't look around, he looked for me, and found me immediately. "You're here late," he said. "I work late." A pause. Then, softer, "You shouldn't walk home alone." "I've been walking home alone for years. Not anymore." The words weren't loud, they didn't need to be. Nico leaned toward me, whispering, "I wanted on record I voted no involvement from the beginning." Dante's attention didn't shift from me. "You were in the street this morning," I said. "That wasn't hospital business." "No, so what was it?" A silence stretched between us, not empty, controlled. "You were seen," he said finally. That should have meant nothing. But something in his tone made my stomach tight. "By who?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stepped closer, not invading, not touching, just close enough that I noticed the scent again. "Clean cedar, cold underneath. Someone who should not know your name," he said. My pulse changed. "I didn't give anyone my name." "I know." That was the problem. Because he sounded like he believed it, not guessed it, knew it. Nico exhaled slowly. "Great, love mystery enemies. Always ends well in documentaries." Dante finally looked away from me, just briefly, toward the corridor, then back. "You're going to stay where I can see you," he said. It wasn't a request. I crossed my arms. "You don't get to decide that." A pause, then something quieter, almost careful. "I already did." And for the first time, I understood this wasn't the beginning of something. It was already happening. I just hadn't learned the rules yet. It happened too fast to call it choice. That's what I remember most. Not the danger, not the sound. Not even the people shouting somewhere behind us. Just the moment Dante moved and the world stopped pretending it was safe. I was leaving the hospital when it started. Nico was mid-rant beside me. "If I survive this job, I'm writing a book." Title: "Everyone around me is insane, and I am the only one with a lease on reality." "You're not writing a book," I said. "I already started chapter 1. Then the first sound cracked through the street, not loud enough at first to understand. Then glass, then people reacting after. Dante appeared beside me like he had been there the entire time, waiting for permission to exist in motion. "Down," he said, not loud, not emotional, final. His hand caught my arm before I fully understood I was falling behind the low wall of the building. The contact wasn't gentle. It was exact, controlled, like he had done it before in his head. Another sound, closer. Nico dropped instantly. "Okay, just confirming this is officially above my job description." "Stay down," Dante snapped without looking at him. That was the first time I saw it. Not his control, what it cost him, because his body didn't flinch when it should have. Mine did, but his hand didn't leave my arm, even when everything around us moved. Even when the air itself felt like it was breaking. "You're looking," he said quietly. "I don't understand what's happening." "That's why you don't look." A pause, then something shifted behind his eyes, not softness. Focus, like I had become the only thing he was allowed to track. When it stopped, it didn't feel like relief. It felt like absence deciding to leave. Nico slowly lifted his head. "I'm still alive. I'd like that documented, possibly framed." Dante finally let go of my arm. But the place where his hand had been still felt too warm. He looked at me for a long second. "You don't leave alone anymore," he said. I frowned. "You don't get to decide that." "I already did," he repeated, and this time I believed him, not because I agreed. Because the world around me had already started obeying him, and I was still pretending I wasn't part of it. I started noticing patterns after that day. Not the kind you study. The kind that follow you. The black car was always there now, never closer, never gone. Just present enough to remind me I was being observed even when I tried to forget it. At the hospital, people began acting differently around me. Not openly, not enough to accuse anyone, just small pauses. Slight hesitations before speaking. Like my name had weight I didn't remember giving it. "Have you told anyone about last night?" Giulia asked quietly during a shift change. "There is nothing to tell." She studied me. "That's not what I heard." My stomach tightened. "What did you hear?" She hesitated. "That someone came to the hospital asking questions." That was the first real crack. Later that evening, I saw Dante again. Not in motion, not arriving, already there. Standing in the same corridor like he had been part of the building longer than I had worked in it. "You're being watched," he said. I didn't stop walking. "I noticed. That wasn't supposed to reach you yet." That made me stop. "What was?" A pause. Then he said, quieter, "Your name wasn't meant to be known." A cold feeling spread under my skin. "My name is not secret." "It is now." Nico appeared behind him at that exact moment, holding 2 coffees and looking deeply offended by existence. "I would like to formally announce," he said, "that I am underpaid for whatever dimension this is." I almost ignored him. Almost. Then Dante looked at me again, not like before, not observing. "Measuring, you should tell me if you notice anything unusual," he said. "That's rich coming from you." A flicker, not amusement, something held back. "You don't understand what you're standing inside of," he said. "I understand hospitals," I replied. "Patients, people, real problems." A silence. Then softer, almost careful, "Then you're already in the most dangerous place in it." That stayed with me longer than I wanted, because he didn't say it like a warning. He said it like he was already late in stopping it. Nico sighed loudly. I miss when my biggest concern was cafeteria soup. It was terrible, but emotionally consistent. Dante didn't react. But his eyes stayed on me a fraction longer than necessary. Like he was deciding something again, and not liking what he had to choose. The hospital should have felt safe. That was the lie I kept telling myself. White walls, clean floors, the constant rhythm of machines that measured life in numbers instead of feelings, but nothing felt normal anymore. Not since the first time Morty said my name like it belonged somewhere deeper than paperwork. I was finishing a late shift when Giulia grabbed my wrist. "You need to see this," she said. "What is it?" She didn't answer. Just led me through the corridor, past the nurse's station, past the waiting room where people slept sitting up like exhaustion was normal. And then I saw him, Dante. Standing at the end of the hall. Not moving, not speaking, just there. And for the first time, I noticed something different. The air around him wasn't empty anymore, it was occupied. Nico was leaning against the wall beside him, holding a cup of coffee like it was the only thing preventing him from dissolving into stress. "If this escalates," Nico muttered, "I am legally requesting reincarnation into something simpler, maybe a chair." Dante didn't look at him, his eyes were already on me. "You're late leaving," he said. "I work," I replied. A pause, then quieter. "That's what makes it predictable," I frowned. "Predictable for who?" He didn't answer. Instead, he stepped forward. Just one step, but everything in me reacted to it. Not fear, awareness, like my body understood something my mind hadn't agreed to yet. "Someone tried to reach you again," he said. My stomach tightened. "At the hospital?" "No." That single word changed the temperature of the room. "Then where?" His gaze didn't shift. "Through you." I didn't understand that, not fully. But I felt it anyway. Like a door inside the world had opened, and I had been standing too close to it. Giulia stepped back slightly, suddenly aware she shouldn't be here. Nico, however, leaned forward. "Oh good," he said. "We've upgraded from vague danger to targeted existential crisis. My favorite arc." Dante ignored him completely, as always. He looked at me like I was the only variable he couldn't calculate cleanly. "You need to leave with me," he said. I let out a short breath. "No." That answer should have ended it. It didn't. Because he didn't argue, he just studied me, like he was deciding how much control he needed to keep me alive. "I don't follow orders," I added. "I know," he said immediately. That stopped me. Because there was no frustration in his voice, only recognition, like he had already accounted for it. Then he added something quieter. "That's why you're still standing in front of me." The words settled in my chest in a way I didn't like. I turned slightly toward Giulia, grounding myself. "I'm fine," I told her. She didn't look convinced. Neither did I. Dante's voice dropped, not louder, heavier. "You are not fine." I looked back at him sharply. "You don't get to decide that." A pause. "Then I'm not deciding," he said. "I'm observing." That was worse, because observation implied certainty, not opinion. Nico raised his hand slightly. "Just a suggestion, can we observe less intensely?" I feel like I'm being emotionally audited. No one responded. The hallway felt too small now, too aware. Dante stepped closer again, not enough to touch. Enough that I stopped thinking about moving away. "You keep returning to the same places at the same times," he said. "So do most people." "No." That was immediate, absolute. "That's pattern, yours is not pattern, it's exposure." I frowned. "Exposure to what?" He hesitated, just for a second. "Then, to me," he said. The words didn't land like arrogance. They landed like consequence. My breath caught slightly before I could stop it. "That's not how that works," I said quietly. "It is now." Silence. Nico sighed deeply. "I want everyone to know I miss boredom. Boredom was safer. Boredom never tried to emotionally abduct me." Dante finally looked away from me, just briefly. Toward the corridor behind us, then back, and when he spoke again, his voice was lower, controlled, almost restrained in a way that felt different than before. "There are people who will use your existence to reach me," he said. That made something cold settle in my stomach. "I didn't ask for that." "I know." His answer came too quickly, too certain. "And I am trying to make sure you survive it anyway." That line shouldn't have meant anything, but it did, because it wasn't romantic. It wasn't soft. It was responsibility carried too long. I took a small step back, not away from him, just enough to breathe. "You keep saying things like that," I said, "like I'm already involved." A pause, then, "You are." It wasn't forceful. It was factual. That was the moment I felt it. Not fear, shift, something irreversible moving under the surface of my life. Nico cleared his throat loudly. "I would like to remind everyone I was hired for security, not emotional prophecy." Dante finally exhaled slowly. Then quietly to me, "I didn't want you in this." That made me look at him differently. "Then why am I in it?" A long silence. This time he didn't answer immediately. "And when he did, it started before you met me," he said. That shouldn't have made sense. But it did, in the worst possible way, because it meant I hadn't stepped into his world. I had already been standing inside its shadow. I just hadn't seen the shape of it yet. Dante's gaze stayed on me for a moment longer than usual. Then he said something that changed the air completely. "You're coming with me tonight?" I shook my head immediately. "No." He didn't react, not outwardly, but something behind his eyes tightened. Not anger, decision, and that was worse. "I will not take you unwillingly," he said. A pause, then softer, "but I will not leave you where you are." Nico raised a hand again. "I just want to clarify, am I emotionally or physically accompanying this situation?" No answer. Dante finally turned slightly, just enough to signal movement, not command, not request, expectation. And for the first time since I met him, I didn't immediately say no again. Because something inside me had already started asking a question I didn't want to answer. If I stayed here, was I actually safe? Or just unclaimed? And somehow that felt worse. I should have gone home. That was the thought that kept repeating in my head as I stood outside the hospital entrance, keys in my hand, not moving. The night air in Milan was colder than I remembered. Or maybe I was just noticing it differently now, because nothing felt separate anymore. Not streets, not people. Not the quiet distance between safety and whatever Dante Morty had pulled me into. The black car was already there. Of course it was, not blocking the road, not dramatic. Just waiting like it had always belonged there. Nico was leaning against it, eating something that looked suspiciously like stress and regret in pastry form. "I want you to know," he said when he saw me, "that I have officially upgraded from bodyguard to emotional hostage negotiator. No additional pay has been discussed." "I am deeply offended." "You're still talking," I said. "That's my coping mechanism." He stepped aside as the back door opened. Dante didn't get out. He didn't need to, he just looked at me. And that was enough to make the world feel narrower. "You're not going home alone," he said. I tightened my grip on my keys. "I didn't agree to that." "I know." A pause. Then quieter, "That's why it matters." Something about that answer made my chest feel tight in a way I didn't like. Nico leaned in slightly. "For the record, I voted for normal life. I was outvoted." As usual, democracy is a lie. I should have laughed, I didn't, because across the street I noticed it again. Another car, different, too still. Watching, Dante saw it too. His expression didn't change, but something in his posture did. Not tension, readiness. "Get in," he said. This time I didn't argue immediately. That hesitation was enough. The car moved before I fully decided. We drove in silence for a while, not comfortable silence, controlled silence, the kind that felt like it'd wait. I stared out the window, watching the city blur into lines of light and shadow. "You're quieter than before," I said finally. "I'm always quiet." "No," I replied. "This is different." A pause. "Then you're noticing more now." That wasn't an answer, it was a confirmation. Nico, in the front seat, turned slightly. "Can I just say, this is the longest I've ever gone without someone explaining what's happening, and I've survived 3 workplace accidents and 1 emotional betrayal from a pigeon." No one responded. Dante's voice came low. "You were seen outside the hospital again." "I go outside the hospital every day." "Not like that." I turned toward him. "What does that mean?" He didn't look at me immediately. When he did, his gaze was steady, measuring, like he was deciding how much truth I could carry. "Someone followed you," he said. My stomach tightened. "You keep saying that. Because it keeps happening." Silence. Then I said it. "What do they want from me?" That question changed the air. Even Nico stopped breathing for a second. Dante didn't answer right away. When he did, it wasn't simple. "They don't want you," he said. That should have been comforting. It was. "They want what you can reach me through." My throat went dry. "I don't understand." "I know." That was the worst part. He wasn't guessing, he was confirming. The car slowed, not at a destination, at awareness. Dante leaned slightly forward. "Your name isn't the reason," he said quietly. "Your proximity is." That word again. Proximity, like I was already placed too close to something I hadn't agreed to touch. Nico exhaled. "I would like to formally request we stop saying things like proximity in moving vehicles. It makes me feel like I'm in a documentary about doomed people." The car turned into a different street. One I didn't recognize. "I'm not part of this," I said quietly. Dante finally looked at me fully. "You are now." It wasn't forceful, it was final. And for the first time, I didn't immediately reject it, because rejecting it didn't change the fact that I was still here, still in the car, still moving deeper into something I didn't understand. We stopped in front of a building I didn't recognize. Dark, quiet, controlled, not abandoned, protected. Nico got out first, stretching like he was preparing for emotional warfare. "All right," he said. "If I die, I want it on record that I predicted all of this." I hesitated before stepping out. Dante was already beside me, not touching. Close enough that I could feel his presence more than his movement. "You stay with me tonight," he said. I looked at him sharply. "That's not happening." A pause. Then, softer, "It already is." That should have sounded like control. It didn't. It sounded like certainty shaped by something I hadn't seen yet. Inside the building, the air changed immediately. Not warmer, safer in a different way, controlled access, silent corridors, men I didn't know watching without staring. This wasn't a house, it was a boundary, and I was inside it. Nico leaned toward me as we walked. "I want to clarify, I did not agree to a kidnapping situation. I was informed post-incident." Dante stopped at a door, opened it, looked at me. "You don't leave this building alone," he said. "I didn't agree to that either." "I know." A pause. Then something lower. "You don't have to agree for it to be necessary." That was the moment it stopped feeling like protection and started feeling like gravity, not forcing me down, just making it harder to leave. I stepped inside anyway, and I hated myself for how easily I did, because somewhere deep down, I wasn't sure anymore if I was being taken, or if I had already decided to stay. I woke up knowing something was wrong before I opened my eyes, not because of sound, because of silence, the kind that doesn't belong to sleep. The room was unfamiliar, concrete walls, a single narrow window too high to matter, light that didn't feel like morning or night. My wrists weren't tied. They didn't need to be. The door alone did that job. I sat up slowly. My body felt fine, too fine, like I hadn't been moved roughly, just placed. That was worse. A lock clicked somewhere outside, then footsteps, not rushed, not uncertain, controlled. The door opened, and Dante stepped in. For a moment, I didn't speak, because something in his expression told me this wasn't an arrival, it was a confirmation. "You're awake," he said, not relief, assessment. I swallowed. "Where am I?" "A safe place." That answer meant nothing. I stood slowly. "Safe from what?" He didn't respond immediately. That silence told me more than words. "Finally, from being seen," he said. My stomach tightened. "That doesn't make sense." "It does now." I took a step toward him. "You moved me. I relocated you. That's the same thing." "No," he said quietly. "It is." A pause stretched between us, the kind that made space feel smaller, not larger. "I didn't agree to this," I said. "I know." That answer again. Always I know, like my resistance was already accounted for. My hands curled slightly at my sides. "You can't just decide?" "I already did," he interrupted, not raised voice, not anger, finality. It hit harder than shouting would have. Behind him, I heard movement in the corridor. "Nico." "Just so everyone is aware," he called, "I have officially entered the this is above my emotional clearance level phase of employment." He stepped into view, looked at me, then the room. Paused. "Oh," he added, "this is the no windows existential edition." Lovely. I ignored him. "Why am I here?" I asked again. Dante studied me for a long moment. "Then, because they followed you last night. I told you people walk behind me all the time. This wasn't walking. The way he said it made my skin tighten. I shook my head. You keep saying they. Who is they? A pause, longer this time. Then he said something different. People who understand what you are to me. That made the air shift. I laughed once, sharp. I'm not anything to you. He didn't react immediately. When he did, it was quieter. That's why you're still alive. Silence dropped hard between us. Nico cleared his throat. If I may interrupt this romantic misunderstanding with impending doom, are we doing the part where I get assigned moral responsibility, or is that later? No one answered him. Dante stepped closer. Not invading, not touching, just close enough that I had to look up slightly. You were taken for 8 minutes, he said, my breath caught. I wasn't, you were moved before it escalated, he corrected. That is not the same thing, my voice lowered. You said you would stop deciding for me. A flicker, not guilt, constraint. I am stopping, he said, a pause, then softer, almost like it cost him. This is what stopping looks like. That didn't feel like comfort, it felt like trade. Something exchanged I hadn't agreed to. I looked away first. A mistake, because when I looked back, he was still there, unmoved, like he had already decided I would understand eventually. I want to leave, I said, no hesitation, no softness. Dante didn't respond immediately. Nico very quietly said, I would like to formally resign from the concept of consequences. The silence stretched. Then Dante spoke. You can't leave alone. I can leave however I want. His eyes held mine, and for the first time something in them changed, not control, not dominance, strain. Like he was holding something together that didn't want to stay contained. If you walk out, he said quietly, you won't make it far. That should have felt like a threat. It didn't. It felt like truth he didn't want to say. I stepped back. So what, you just keep me here? A pause, then, I keep you breathing. The words landed too heavy, not romantic, not soft. Terrifying in their simplicity, Nico muttered, I miss my old job, which involved significantly less existential accounting. Dante finally looked away from me, just briefly. Like even he needed distance from what he was saying, then back. You don't understand what changed, he said. I understand that I didn't agree to any of it. I know. And again, that answer. Always I know, like agreement had never been part of the equation. The room felt smaller now, not physically, structurally, like the world outside had been removed from consideration. Dante stepped back slightly, not leaving, resetting distance. You stay here tonight, he said. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out immediately. Because something in me, something I didn't want to name, already understood. This wasn't a question anymore. It was containment, and I hated how part of me had stopped fighting it. Not because I agreed, but because I was starting to understand. He wasn't the only thing that made leaving dangerous anymore. Staying had already started changing what I was allowed to be. And that realization scared me more than the room ever could. I stopped counting hours after a while. Time didn't feel like it belonged to me in that room. It moved anyway, without permission. Without witnesses. The door clicked open again before I heard footsteps this time. I was sitting on the edge of the bed when Nico came in first. He looked worse than before. Which for Nico meant he was now actively negotiating with fate and losing. I have an announcement, he said seriously. Dante followed behind him, calm as always. Too calm for what I was starting to understand about calm. Nico pointed at me. She is still here, that's good. I was briefly concerned we had upgraded to tragic backstory arc without consent. Where am I? I asked again. Dante didn't answer immediately. He rarely did when the question mattered most. Instead, he looked at the door behind him, then at me, then said, close. That wasn't an answer, it was a position I stood. Close to what? A pause. Then me. The word landed differently this time, not possession, proximity, dangerously simple. I shook my head. That's not a location. It is now. Nico sighed heavily. I would like to formally note that every sentence he says sounds like it was written by a man who refuses to be emotionally audited. A sound came from the corridor, not footsteps. Impact, distant. Then closer. Dante's posture changed immediately, not panic, transition, like something inside him had been waiting for permission to become real. Stay behind me, he said. I'm not, he turned slightly. One look, not raised voice, not anger, instruction, I stopped talking. The door opened hard this time, not gently, not controlled. Men came in, not many, enough. The kind that didn't need to announce themselves. Everything after that didn't feel like movement. It felt like correction. Dante moved first, not fast, certain. I remember trying to step back and realizing I had nowhere meaningful to go. Nico, somehow, was still talking. If I survive this, I am billing therapy hourly. One of the men reached for me. Didn't get close. Dante intercepted him like the space had already been mapped in advance. There was no chaos in his movement, only inevitability, and that was worse. Because it didn't feel like reaction, it felt like design. At some point, I realized I was holding my breath. At some point after that, I realized Dante had positioned himself between me and everything else without ever needing to look back. When it ended, it didn't end loudly. It ended with absence again. The kind that follows violence like a shadow refuses to leave light. Nico slowly raised his hands. I would like to report that I am still alive, which is both surprising and inconvenient. Dante didn't respond. He looked at the room, then at me. And for the first time since this started, something in his expression wasn't controlled. It was measured, careful, like he was recalculating what I was seeing. You saw, he said. I swallowed. I didn't have a choice. A pause, then softer. No, he agreed. You didn't. That should have made me feel protected. It didn't. It made me feel included, and I wasn't sure which one was worse. Nico stepped aside slightly, glancing at the bodies being removed outside the frame of the doorway. I am formally requesting a hazard pay increase and a priest on standby, he said. No one responded. Dante took a step toward me, then stopped. Not because of danger, because of me, something in him checked itself. Like he was remembering I could still leave in my mind, even if not in the room. You were not meant to see that, he said quietly. I laughed once, but it didn't sound like humor. I'm starting to notice I'm not meant to see anything. Silence. He didn't argue. That was new. Instead, he said, they came for you. I shook my head. No, they came for you. I'm just used, he finished. The word hit sharper than I expected. I flinched before I could stop it. He noticed. Of course he did. Something in his eyes shifted immediately, not satisfaction, not regret, adjustment. I did not mean it like that, he said. A pause. Then quieter, but it is what they will use. That difference mattered more than I wanted it to. Nico cleared his throat again. Just to clarify, am I the only one here who is experiencing this as extreme workplace violation? Dante finally looked away from me, just for a second, then back. You stay here, he said again. I shook my head. You keep saying that like I have a choice. You do. That made me stop, because his voice didn't match the words. I searched his face. You're lying, I said. A pause, long. Then I am not asking you to stay, he corrected quietly. That was worse. I frowned. Then what are you doing? He looked at me for a long moment. And for the first time, the answer didn't come immediately. When it did, I am keeping you from becoming collateral, he said. Silence, heavy, real. Nico exhaled slowly. I would like to state for the record I now understand what collateral means, and I regret learning English. I took a step back, not away from him, from the idea. You don't get to decide that, I said. I already did, Dante said. Then he paused. Something in him tightened again, not control this time, responsibility. And softer, because no one else will. That line stayed in the air longer than anything else had, because it didn't sound like power. It sounded like burden. And for the first time since I met him, I didn't know if I was being protected, or placed somewhere I could never leave without breaking something I didn't yet understand. The building didn't feel like a place anymore. It felt like a line. One side of it was the world I used to understand. The other side was whatever Dante Morty had decided I lived in now. I noticed the silence first. Not absence of sound, controlled absence. Men positioned without movement, doors that didn't close loudly, air that felt too monitored to belong to anything natural. Dante stood by the window when I came in, not looking out, just positioned there like he was waiting for something outside to fail first. Nico was sitting on a chair that looked like it had given up on ergonomics and hope. I would like to announce, he said immediately, that I am no longer surprised by anything. This is now my permanent personality trait. I didn't answer him, I looked at Dante instead. What's happening? I asked. He didn't turn right away. When he did, it wasn't slow, it was deliberate. They found the route, he said, my stomach tightened. Route to what? A pause. Then, to you. That word again, not said like ownership, said like exposure. I shook my head. I'm not a route. His eyes held mine. You are to them. Something cold settled in my chest. Nico stood up slightly. Just to confirm, this is the part where I start emotionally preparing for betrayal, correct? No one responded. Dante stepped away from the window, not toward me, toward the room itself. Like he was checking its integrity. You shouldn't be here, I said quietly. That made him stop. Slowly, he looked at me, and for a second, something in him softened, not in expression, in restraint. I know, he said, always the same words. I know, like everything I felt had already been accounted for in a calculation I wasn't allowed to see. A distant sound echoed through the lower floor. Not loud, enough. Dante's entire posture changed. Not fear, transition, like a locked mechanism being opened from the inside. Stay behind me, he said. I'm not. He looked at me, just once. And I stopped speaking, not because I agreed, because something in me understood I wouldn't win that sentence. Nico raised a hand. I would like to clarify that I am emotionally present but physically unqualified for whatever is about to happen. The first impact came before footsteps. The door didn't open. It gave up. Men entered, not shouting, not dramatic, certain. Everything after that moved too quickly to name cleanly. Dante didn't rush. That was the part that stayed in my mind later. He never rushed. He moved like every outcome had already been removed except one. At some point, I realized I was pressed back against the wall. Not trapped, positioned. Dante had placed himself between me and everything without looking back even once. Not once. That should have felt like protection. But it felt like distance had been removed from my ability to participate. Nico, somehow, was still talking. I just want to note for legal purposes that I did not sign up for interpretive violence as a workplace benefit. Then it ended, not with collapse, with absence. Like the room forgot what it had been doing. Silence returned, but heavier now, carrying memory. Dante stood still for a moment longer than necessary, then turned. Only then did he look at me. And I saw it, not victory, not relief, containment. You saw too much, he said quietly. My throat felt tight. I didn't ask to be here. I know, that answer again, always I know. But now it didn't sound like control. It sounded like consequence he had already accepted. Nico leaned against the wall. I would like to formally request a timeline where I stop experiencing near-death bonding exercises. No one responded. Dante took a step toward me, stopped halfway, not because of danger. Because of me, something in him recalculated again, like my reaction mattered more than the aftermath outside the room. You are not part of this, I said. A pause, then, you are the reason it reached this far, he answered. That should have sounded like blame. It didn't. It sounded like fact. I shook my head. Then why am I still here? Silence. A longer one this time. Dante's gaze didn't move away. When he spoke again, his voice was lower, not softer, stripped. Because if I let you go, he said, you won't stay outside it. That made something in my chest tighten painfully. That's not your decision, I said. It already is. Nico exhaled sharply. I would like to remind everyone I am still underpaid and spiritually uninsured. I looked at Dante, really looked at him. For the first time, I saw something beneath the control, not emotion. Weight. Something carried too long to put down cleanly. You keep saying that, I said quietly, like I belong to the outcome instead of the choice. A pause. Then he said something that didn't sound like power at all. It's not about belonging, he said. It's about surviving what you're inside of. Silence again, this one different, not heavy, true. And I hated that I understood it a little too easily. Outside, footsteps faded. Whatever had come was gone. For now, but nothing in the room felt like it had returned to normal. Because nothing normal survives being rearranged. Dante finally stepped back, not away, just enough to breathe. And I realized something I didn't want to admit yet. I wasn't being kept here because I was weak. I was being kept here because the moment I walked out, the world might already know exactly where to find me. And that meant staying wasn't safety. It was delay. The morning after didn't feel like morning. It felt like the world trying to pretend it hadn't changed shape. The building was quieter than before, not peaceful, just recalibrated. Like something violent had passed through it, and everything inside was deciding how to continue existing around the damage. Dante was already up when I found him, standing near the same window again. Always the window, like he expected the outside world to eventually explain itself. Nico was sitting on the floor this time, staring at a coffee cup like it had personally betrayed him. "I would like to announce," he said flatly, "that I am no longer emotionally available for any additional plot development." No one responded. I stepped closer to Dante. "What happens now?" I asked. He didn't turn immediately. When he did, his face looked the same as always, but something behind it had shifted. "We stabilize," he said. "That's it." A pause. Then quieter, "That's survival." The word didn't feel like comfort. It felt like limitation. I crossed my arms. "And me?" That made him stop, not fully. Just enough to acknowledge the weight of the question. "You don't go back," he said. I exhaled sharply. "That's not an answer." "It is," he replied. Silence. Nico muttered, "I miss when my biggest moral dilemma was whether to eat expired yogurt." Dante finally stepped away from the window, not toward control, toward distance. "I can't undo what you've seen," he said. "I didn't ask you to." "I know." Always that again, "I know," but now it sounded less like certainty, more like consequence he couldn't separate himself from. Something in me tightened. "So what am I then?" I asked quietly. "Protection, liability, something in between." Dante looked at me for a long moment, long enough that Nico stopped pretending to exist. Then he said, "Someone I couldn't leave there." The words didn't land like ownership. They landed like admission, heavy, uncomfortable, real. I looked away first, a mistake. Because when I looked back, his expression hadn't changed, but the air between us had. And for the first time, I understood, whatever this was, it wasn't a decision he made once. It was something he kept choosing, again and again. Every time I was still standing in front of him, 6 months changed the shape of silence, not the world outside. That still moved the same way: cars, shifts, alarms, mornings that didn't ask permission to begin. But me, I noticed space differently now. How close people stood, how long doors stayed open. How often I checked exits without thinking. Dante didn't correct it. He never did. Some habits he didn't take away. He just stood beside them until they stopped feeling like fear and started feeling like awareness. Nico, somehow still alive in the same orbit, leaned against a counter one afternoon and said, "I would like to formally announce that I have accepted my fate as a recurring side character in a morally ambiguous universe." No one responded. Dante stood behind me as I worked at the clinic desk, quiet, present, unchanged in the way he always was, but not distant anymore. That was the difference I didn't know how to explain. I reached for a file. My hand brushed the edge of a cracked mug someone had left there weeks ago. I froze for half a second. Dante noticed. Of course he did. "You still do that," he said quietly. "What?" "Pause," he said, "before you decide something is safe." I didn't answer, because he was right. I looked at him. "Does it ever stop?" He didn't pretend not to understand. "No," he said. A pause, then softer, "But it changes what you call safe." Silence settled between us, not heavy anymore, just there, familiar. Nico sighed. "I miss when safety was a concept and not a negotiation." Dante stepped slightly closer, not enough to take space, just enough to share it. And I realized something I hadn't been able to name before. I didn't feel pulled anymore. I felt aware. Of him. Of what it cost him to stand where he stood. Of what it cost me to stay where I was. "You still think I didn't choose this," I said quietly. Dante looked at me for a long moment. Then, "I think you keep choosing it," he said. The words didn't trap me. They reflected me. I didn't answer, because I knew he was right. And that was the part that scared me most. Not that I had been taken into his world, but that I had stopped trying to leave it.